In the midst of the lavish harborside restaurant, a poor, sloppy customer walked in, causing all the staff to avoid him except Malik. When Malik saw the man only daring to order water and fries, he quietly approached and placed a free burger on the table, despite the fact that the manager was squeezing his tip. Malik did not expect that his kindness in difficult times would soon be rewarded, when the stranger was the one who held the key to changing his life forever. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from, and subscribe because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. Thursday night at Harborside, the place was packed, plates clattering, pans hissing. Malik Jordan moved through the chaos like he'd been born into it. Table 6 needed refills. Table 9 was ready to order. Table 12's entrees were up in the kitchen window. His feet ached. 4 hours into the shift and 3 more to go, but his hands stayed steady, his smile stayed fixed, and his mind tracked everything at once the way it had for the past 6 years. A couple at table 4 waved him over. The woman looked annoyed, her husband already reaching for his wallet. Malik approached with his usual calm, wondering what he'd done wrong this time. Before he could speak, Victor Kane appeared at his elbow, all teeth and cologne and that particular brand of managerial aggression that made Malik's shoulders tense. "Malik, we need to turn that table," Victor said, not quite loud enough for the customers to hear clearly, but loud enough that they'd catch the tone. "We're not running a retirement home here, buddy. You've got people waiting." Malik glanced toward the entrance. 2 parties maybe. Not exactly a line out the door, but he knew better than to argue. He turned to the couple with an apologetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Folks, I'm so sorry, but we do have some guests waiting if you're all finished up," he said, his voice friendly, but firm in that way that meant, "Please don't make this harder than it has to be." The husband's face reddened. The wife grabbed her purse with sharp, angry movements. They stood without a word, the husband dropping a $10 bill on the table, barely 8%, before they walked out. Victor clapped Malik on the shoulder like they were buddies. "See? Efficient. That's what I like to see." Malik said nothing. He cleared the table, reset it, and moved on to table 9, where a family of 4 was ready to order. His jaw ached from smiling. By 10:30, the dining room had finally emptied. Malik's feet throbbed, his lower back screamed, but the worst part was always what came next. "All right, people, let's settle up." Victor called from behind the bar, his voice carrying that false cheerfulness that made Malik want to walk straight out the door and never come back. The servers gathered. Malik, Emma Williams, Jason Davis, Rebecca Moore. All of them tired, all of them watching Victor with that same careful blankness that came from knowing exactly what was about to happen and being powerless to stop it. Victor placed a large glass jar on the bar. You know the drill. Everything goes in. We split it fair. Malik pulled his tips from his apron pocket. $280 in cash, plus the credit card slips he'd collected throughout the night. He'd been counting all evening, the way he always did, keeping a running tally in his head. It was a good night. Not great, but solid. Enough to make a dent in this month's insulin costs. Emma dumped her tips in first, then Jason, then Rebecca. Malik added his last, watching the bills pile up in the jar. Victor turned his back to them, always turned his back, and began counting. The seconds stretched. Malik watched Victor's shoulders, the way his elbows moved, the slight tilt of his head. From this angle, you couldn't see his hands. You couldn't see what those hands were doing. "All right, total comes to $835, Victor announced, turning back around with 4 envelopes in his hands. "Not bad for a Thursday. Could have been better if we'd turned tables faster, but hey, we work with what we've got." Malik's stomach dropped. 835. That couldn't be right. He'd had 280 himself. Emma had been slammed all night. She had to have pulled at least 200. Jason and Rebecca combined probably had another 300 easy. That put them well over 1,000. He took his envelope, opened it. $63. Emma frowned at her share. "This seems kinda low. I had a lot of big tops tonight." Victor's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. "Lots of bad tippers tonight, Emma. What can I say? Some nights are like that." Jason and Rebecca took their envelopes without comment. They'd learned, just like Malik had learned, that questioning Victor led nowhere good. Reduced hours, worse shifts, or just straight up gone, like the 15 people who'd quit this year. "We good?" Victor asked, and it wasn't really a question. They nodded. They dispersed. Malik headed for the employee break room, that tiny windowless space that smelled like old coffee and defeat. He sat on the bench and pulled out his wallet. From the billfold, he removed a worn manila envelope, the edges soft from handling. Lily's college fund was written across the front in his own handwriting, from back when he'd still believed the words meant something. He unfolded a fresh piece of paper from his pocket and wrote in small, careful letters, "Thursday, November 7th. Estimated $280 my tables. Victor gave me 63. He added it to the stack inside the envelope. 48 pieces of paper now. 48 nights, 48 lies that he documented with the grim determination of someone who knew the truth mattered, even if no one was listening. What else could he do? Go to the owner? William Langford probably didn't even know Malik's name. Guys like that didn't sweat the details. They stayed in their offices, looked at profit margins, and trusted people like Victor to handle the ground-level operations. And Victor was handling them, all right, handling them straight into his own pockets. Malik folded the envelope and tucked it back into his wallet. His phone buzzed. A text from his ex-wife. "Lily's prescription is ready. $340 this time. Insurance only covered half." He closed his eyes. $63 tonight. Maybe another 60 or 70 tomorrow if he was lucky. The math didn't work. It never worked. But he'd figure it out the way he always did. Skip a meal here, push a bill there, borrow from the college fund that wasn't really a fund anymore, just an envelope full of evidence that no one would ever see. He stood, grabbed his jacket, and walked out through the kitchen. The night air hit him like cold water. He climbed into his 15-year-old Honda, the one with the check engine light that had been on for 8 months, and sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel. Tomorrow he'd do it all again. Smile at customers who treated him like furniture. Watch Victor steal what little he earned. Go home and try to explain to his daughter why they had to ration her insulin, why college might not happen, why the world was built to grind people like them into dust. He started the engine. It coughed, sputtered, then caught. Just like him, still running, barely. But Malik had no idea that his story didn't start here. 2 nights earlier, high above the city, someone else had already sensed that something was very, very wrong. 2 days ago, the Langford building glowed like a vertical blade of light cutting through the dark winter sky. But the corner office on the 14th floor felt unusually still. William Langford sat behind his wide walnut desk, the city stretching beneath him like a restless ocean of headlights and windows. Normally, the view energized him. Tonight, it only made him feel distance. Distance from the street, from his employees, from the work that used to make sense. He stared at the spreadsheet on his laptop, a neat grid of numbers that should have reassured him. Revenue up 12%, 5 locations performing above projections, 80 employees on payroll. Every indicator said Harborside Restaurant Group was thriving. Investors would call these numbers beautiful. So, why did he feel like something was quietly decaying beneath the surface? He rubbed the back of his neck and leaned away from the screen. His eyes drifted to the framed handwriting on the wall behind him, a piece of notebook paper, the edges yellowing slightly, his father's blocky, imperfect script captured under glass. "Your people are your business. Protect them like it." He'd read that sentence thousands of times, but tonight the meaning hit differently. Maybe because he could suddenly hear the man's voice behind it. "Billy, come here a minute," his father had said one night long ago in the cramped, noisy kitchen of the very first Harborside. William had been maybe 17, still figuring out whether he wanted anything to do with restaurants. "You think leadership is keeping your hands clean?" "No," William muttered, trying to be respectful. His father shoved a mop into his hands with a laugh. "Wrong answer. You lead by showing up. You lead by listening, by knowing every person working with you." He pointed at the dishwashers scrubbing pans. "If you don't know their names, you don't deserve the title." William remembered rolling his eyes then, convinced the world worked differently. 10 years, 5 restaurants, and 100,000 spreadsheets later, he wasn't so sure. His phone buzzed. An email alert. He reached for it absently, expecting a vendor update, a menu change request, something routine. No sender name, no signature, just a subject line that made his stomach go cold. "Check the tip pool." He frowned, waiting for more text, an explanation, anything. But the body of the email was empty. Just those 4 words. Anonymous emails were almost never worth reading. 99 out of 100 were noise. But this one dug straight under his skin. It felt pointed, urgent. He should delete it. Instead, he opened the scheduling software. The weekly roster appeared on screen, names and shifts laid out in color-coded blocks. At first, nothing seemed strange, but then he saw it. Malik Jordan, one of the senior servers at the flagship location, dependable, skilled, universally liked, moved off Friday dinner shifts, consistently the highest earning shifts of the week, and pushed on to Monday lunch duty. Slow, almost dead, a shift you assign to new hires or underperformers, not someone like Malik. That was the first crack. He opened another system, banking records. Victor Kane, his general manager, made deposits regularly. Nothing wrong with that, but the amounts, 835, 890, 135, not round, not scheduled, not consistent with salary, too frequent, too specific, too strange. A pulse of unease worked its way up William's spine. He clicked again, opening digital copies of credit card receipts. One customer had left a $45 tip, solid, generous. POS logged it correctly, but the tip pool summary listed only $12 credited to that server. His brow furrowed. He opened HR files next. 15 people had quit in the last 6 months. 15. Out of 80. Nearly 20% turnover in half a year. High, even for hospitality. Worse, 3 exit interviews referenced the same thing. Management issues. The overhead lights hummed faintly, suddenly loud in the silence. William sat still for a long moment, absorbing everything. Revenue up, morale down, tips disappearing, bank deposits that didn't align with records, schedules manipulated without clear reason. It didn't add up, not in a way he could ignore. His thoughts drifted to Malik, steady, soft-spoken Malik. He remembered him from a company barbecue years ago, standing off to the side with his daughter, Lily. She'd been maybe 7, small, shy, clinging to Malik's pant leg as he guided her around the picnic tables, making sure she got food first, making sure she didn't wander too close to the grill. William remembered thinking, that guy is a good father. And now Malik was being buried in slow shifts. William pushed away from his desk and walked toward the window. From 14 floors up, the streets below looked like veins of light. People were hurrying home from shifts, rushing to night jobs, grabbing late dinners, juggling bills, hoping tips were good enough to cover rent. People like Malik. People like his father once was. People William no longer saw up close. He turned. On the coat rack stood the denim jacket, the one his father wore every day for 20 years. Faded, stained. One sleeve patched with duct tape. After the funeral, William couldn't bring himself to throw it out. He wasn't even sure why. The thing was ugly as sin, but it felt honest. He touched the worn fabric. In the reflection of the window behind it, he saw himself. Expensive suit, polished watch, shoes that cost more than his father's monthly salary back in the day. When had he become this man? When had he stopped showing up? Stopped listening? Stopped knowing the names? He pulled out his phone, opened his calendar. His thumbs moved without hesitation. Undercover Friday night. Flagship location. See it for yourself. He stared at the words. This was ridiculous. He had people for this. Entire teams, procedures, HR protocols. He could call Victor right now, demand answers, suspend him, run an internal audit, check it off the list. But deep down, he knew that wouldn't fix what was broken, because the real problem wasn't Victor. It was the distance. The cracks that had formed between him and the people who actually kept the lights on. The truth, whatever it was, wasn't going to show up in an email or report. It lived on the floor, between the tables, in the quiet conversations at dish pits, in the exhausted eyes of servers finishing double shifts. The only way to see it was to go back down there himself. He saved the note, then pulled up the employee portal. Thursday night, Malik scheduled, Victor managing. Perfect. He sat again at his desk and typed a quick message to his assistant. Cancel everything Friday evening. Personal matter. Unreachable. He hit send before he could reconsider. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling tiles, feeling the weight of the decision settle in his chest. Questions swirled. Who steals from their own staff? How long had this been happening? How many had suffered while he sat up here staring at spreadsheets? And why hadn't he seen it sooner? His father's voice echoed again, clear as if the man were standing beside him. Protect them like it. He whispered into the empty office. I'm trying, Dad. I'm trying. William grabbed his coat, turned off the lights, and headed toward the elevator. The office fell into shadow, leaving only the city's glow behind him. As the elevator descended, 14, 13, 12, he felt something like resolve settle into place. Thursday night, he wouldn't be the CEO. He'd be another tired man walking in off the street, hoping for a hot meal and maybe a little decency. He'd see what Malik saw, what all of them saw, and then, only then, would he decide what came next. Friday night, 6:45 p.m. William Langford stood outside Harborside's flagship location wearing a jacket that smelled like motor oil and regret. He'd found it at a thrift store that afternoon, $8, paint-stained, one pocket torn. His jeans were old, deliberately scuffed. His work boots had seen better days 3 owners ago. In his wallet, he'd left exactly $15 and a driver's license he'd buried under the cash, so no one would see his name without digging. He looked like a guy who'd spent the day on a construction site and had just enough money for something cheap and filling before heading home to an empty apartment. He looked, in other words, like someone Victor Kane wouldn't waste time on. William pushed through the door. Friday night heat hit him immediately. Bodies packed into the waiting area, the bar 3 deep, servers weaving between tables with practiced urgency. The host, Maria Gonzalez, gave him a quick scan, her eyes lingering on his jacket, his boots, the general worn-down quality of his appearance. "Just you?" she asked, and there was something in her tone, a slight edge of judgment that William had never heard directed at him before. "Yeah, just me," he said, keeping his voice flat and tired. Maria grabbed a menu without much enthusiasm. "We've got bar seating available. Might be a while for a table." "Bar's fine." She led him through the dining room. William kept his head down, but his eyes tracked everything. Table arrangements, server stations, the flow of the kitchen. And there, near the bar, he spotted Victor Kane moving through the space like he owned it, all swagger and manufactured charm. Maria deposited him at the far end of the bar, the corner spot where you put people you don't expect to order much or tip well. William slid onto the stool and opened the menu, though he already knew it by heart. He'd approved these prices himself. Now, looking at them from this angle, they seemed different. A burger for $24, appetizers starting at $16. Even the cheapest thing on the menu, fries, cost $9. He had $15. A server approached, moving fast despite the obvious exhaustion in his eyes. Malik Jordan. William recognized him from the employee photo in the database, but seeing him in person was different. Malik was maybe 40, with the kind of lean, worn-down build that came from years of physical work and not enough sleep. His smile was professional, automatic, and completely hollow. "Evening," Malik said, setting down a napkin and silverware. "What can I get you to drink?" "Water's fine," William said. Then, because he needed to sell the part, he added, "What's the cheapest thing you've got?" Something flickered in Malik's expression. Not judgment exactly, more like recognition, like he'd served 1,000 versions of William before and knew exactly what this conversation meant. "Fries are $9. Malik said, his voice careful and neutral. William nodded slowly, doing the math in his head the way someone really broke would do it. Fries and water, $6 tip if he was generous. That'd leave him exactly $0 to get home on. "Yeah, all right, I'll take the fries." Malik wrote it down, and William expected him to leave, do the minimum, move on to tables that actually mattered. Instead, Malik paused, studying him with an expression that was hard to read. "Long day?" Malik asked, and it wasn't small talk. It was genuine. "Something like that," William said. Malik nodded like he understood, like he'd lived it. Then he did something that made William's throat tighten. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice so the bartender wouldn't hear. "Listen, the kitchen made extra burgers tonight. Happens sometimes when orders get messed up. Would you want one? It's just going to waste otherwise." William stared at him. A Harborside Burger Deluxe cost $24. Malik was offering to give it away to a complete stranger for no reason except that the stranger looked tired and hungry and human. "I can't afford that," William said carefully. "I know," Malik replied. "That's why I'm saying it's extra. Nobody's paying for it. It's just going in the trash if you don't take it." William felt something crack open in his chest. This man who was getting robbed blind every single night by the person who was supposed to protect him, was risking his job to feed someone he thought couldn't afford a meal. "Why would you do that?" William asked, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. Malik met his eyes directly, and for the first time all evening, his expression wasn't carefully managed. It was just honest, because nobody who's working hard deserves to leave here with just fries. And because everyone who walks through that door deserves to be treated like they matter, whether they've got $15 or $1,500. William couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything except sit there and feel the full weight of what he'd built, or failed to build, crash down on him. Malik disappeared into the kitchen. William sat frozen at the bar, his mind racing. This was the guy Victor was stealing from. This was the guy getting buried in bad shifts and nickeled and dimed out of tips. And instead of turning bitter, instead of giving up or cutting corners or treating customers like garbage the way plenty of people would, Malik was out here feeding strangers. Malik returned with a plate. Full burger, deluxe toppings, sweet potato fries, side salad, even a small chocolate mousse. Chocolate helps, Malik said, setting it down. Trust me. William looked down at the food, then back up at Malik. Thank you. Don't mention it. Seriously, don't. Malik moved off to check on another table. William picked up the burger with hands that weren't entirely steady. The first bite tasted better than anything he'd eaten in months, not because of the food, but because of what it represented: kindness, dignity, the belief that people mattered, the things his father had built Harborside on, the things William had forgotten. He was halfway through the burger when he heard Victor's voice, sharp and cold, cutting through the ambient noise. Malik, back here. Now. William turned slightly, just enough to see. Victor had Malik cornered near the server station, his body language aggressive, his voice low but furious. You want to explain to me why you're giving away free meals? Malik's face went carefully blank. The burger was extra. Kitchen mistake. I don't care if it fell from the sky. You don't have the authority to give away food. That's a $24 item. The guy couldn't afford. Not my problem. Not your problem. You want to run a charity? Do it on your own time. Victor crossed his arms. That $24 is coming out of your tips tonight. And you know what? Your hours are getting cut too. Down to 9 shifts from 11. Maybe that'll teach you not to give away what isn't yours. Malik's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Just stood there and took it. Victor leaned in closer. You've got a real bleeding heart problem, Malik. That's going to cost you. Fine, Malik said quietly. That's it. Fine. Victor walked away, satisfied. Malik stood there for a long moment, his hands clenched at his sides, before he turned and nearly locked eyes with William. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Malik gave him a tiny nod, the kind that said, "It's okay, don't worry about it," and went back to work. But William wasn't okay. His appetite vanished. The burger sat heavy in his stomach, because he'd just watched Malik pay for his meal with money he didn't have, money that had already been stolen from him, because Malik believed people deserved kindness even when the world didn't return it. Victor called it a bleeding heart, like it was weakness. William knew better. How you treat people when nobody's watching, Malik had said earlier. Victor thought nobody was watching. He was wrong. Friday night, 8:20 p.m. William sat at the bar with his hands wrapped around a water glass he wasn't drinking from, watching Malik move through the dining room like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just been penalized $24 and 2 shifts for the crime of being decent. The burger sat half-finished on William's plate. He couldn't take another bite. Every piece of this meal had cost Malik something he couldn't afford to lose, and the weight of that knowledge pressed down on William's chest like a physical thing. Malik stopped by his table one more time before the rush really hit, his professional mask back in place, though William could see the exhaustion bleeding through around the edges. "How's everything tasting?" Malik asked, and his voice was steady, friendly even, like Victor hadn't just gutted his paycheck 5 minutes ago. "It's good," William managed. "Really good. But listen, I heard what happened back there. I don't want you getting in trouble because of me." Malik's expression shifted slightly, softening into something more real. He glanced over his shoulder, checking to see if Victor was watching, then leaned in just enough that his voice wouldn't carry. "Don't worry about it. Some things matter more than money." He straightened up, that professional smile returning. "Besides, chocolate helps, trust me." William looked down at the chocolate mousse Malik had brought him, untouched on the corner of his plate. This man had just lost hours and wages, and he was still making sure a stranger got dessert. "Why?" William asked, and he wasn't acting anymore. "Why risk your job for someone you don't even know?" Malik was quiet for a moment, his eyes tracking to a table where a young couple was arguing in hushed tones, to an elderly man eating alone by the window, to a family with 3 kids who were making a mess and clearly stressing their parents out. Then his gaze came back to William. Because I've been that guy at the bar with $15 trying to figure out if I can afford to eat and still have bus fare home. And I've been that guy wondering if anyone in the world gives a damn whether I exist. Malik's voice dropped lower, more intense. So yeah, I'm going to treat people like they matter because they do, even if it costs me. He walked away before William could respond, pulled back into the chaos of the Friday night rush. William watched him go, watched him greet new customers with genuine warmth, watched him handle a complaint with patience he shouldn't have had left, watched him refill waters and clear plates and do everything right, even though the system was designed to punish him for it. Victor reappeared near the host stand, surveying his kingdom with that particular smugness of someone who believes they've won. He caught William's eye for a brief second, and William had to force himself not to react, not to let anything show on his face that might give him away. Instead, he pulled out his wallet and counted what was left. $15. He left 10 on the bar for Malik, more than half of what he'd walked in with, and kept 5 for appearances. Then he stood, nodded once toward Malik, who was too busy to notice, and headed for the door. But he didn't leave. Not really. He circled around to the alley behind the restaurant where employees parked, where the kitchen exhaust vented steam into the cold night air, where dumpsters lined up against brick walls, and security lights cast everything in harsh white glare. He found a spot in the shadows where he could see the back entrance and waited. 15 minutes passed, then 30. The dinner rush was still going strong inside, but out here it was just William and the distant sound of traffic and the smell of fryer oil. Finally, the back door opened. Malik stepped out, jacket pulled tight against the November cold, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion that he didn't have to hide anymore. He stopped just outside the door, leaning against the brick wall for a moment like he needed it to hold him up. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out that manila envelope, the one marked Lily's college fund. William's breath caught. He pressed deeper into the shadows, watching as Malik unfolded a piece of paper and wrote something on it with a pen he'd pulled from his apron. Even from this distance, William could see the careful precision in Malik's movements, the way he held the paper close to the security light to see what he was writing. Malik added the paper to a stack inside the envelope, and for just a second his face crumpled, not crying, not breaking down, just this brief moment of raw pain before he forced it back under control. He tucked the envelope away, straightened his shoulders, and walked toward a beat-up Honda that had seen better days. The car coughed when he started it, sputtered twice, then caught. Malik sat there for a moment with his hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. Then he drove away, taillights disappearing into Boston traffic. William stayed in the shadows for another minute, processing what he'd just seen. Malik was documenting everything, every shift, every theft, every lie, building a case that no one would ever look at because guys like Malik didn't have power, didn't have platforms, didn't have anyone listening. But William was listening now. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to his IT director. Need you in the office tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Urgent. Bring access codes for security footage, all locations. The response came back almost immediately. Everything okay? William typed slowly, deliberately. No, but it will be. He walked back to his car, that thrift store jacket feeling heavier than it should. He'd come here looking for evidence of theft. He'd found that and more. He'd found a man who chose kindness in a system designed to punish it. He'd found exactly the kind of employee his father had always said was the heart of any business. And he'd found out what happened when you stopped protecting your people. They protected each other instead, at their own expense, at their own risk. Malik's words echoed in William's head. How you treat people when nobody's watching is who you really are. Victor thought nobody was watching. Tomorrow, William would prove him wrong. Saturday morning, 7:03 a.m., William's office was dark except for the glow of 3 computer monitors. His IT director, James Chen, sat across from him, looking equal parts concerned and confused, a massive coffee in one hand and access codes pulled up on his tablet. What exactly are we looking for? James asked carefully. Security footage, 8 weeks back. I need every camera angle you've got on the manager's office and the tip counting area at the flagship location. James's eyebrows went up, But he knew better than to ask too many questions. He pulled up the server access and started transferring files. This is going to take a while. We're talking hundreds of hours of footage. Then let's get started. They worked in silence. James pulled up the first night's footage, synced to the timestamp when the restaurant closed. William watched Victor Kane appear on screen, gathering the tip jar, his body language casual and confident. "Can you zoom in?" William asked. James adjusted the angle. The resolution was good enough to see Victor turn his back to the servers, good enough to see his hands moving as he counted, good enough to see the moment he palmed bills and slid them into his jacket pocket before turning around to announce the total. William's jaw tightened. Next night, they went through it systematically. November 7th, November 6th, November 5th. Each night, the same pattern. Victor turning away. Victor counting. Victor stealing. Not every night. He was smart enough to be inconsistent, but often enough that the numbers added up fast. By 9 a.m., William had filled a legal pad with notes, dates, amounts, camera angles. James had pulled the corresponding POE's data, matching what customers actually tipped against what Victor reported to the tip pool. The discrepancies were staggering. "Jesus," James muttered, staring at his screen. "Is this guy really stealing from servers?" "Yes." William didn't elaborate. He was too focused on the pattern forming in front of him. "Pull up November 7th, the night I was there." James found the footage. William watched himself sit at the bar, watched Malik bring him food, watched the confrontation happen in real time from a different angle. And there, clear as day, was Victor intercepting Malik after the shift, his finger jabbing toward Malik's chest, his mouth moving in what was obviously a threat, even without audio. Later in the footage, Victor counted the tips. $835 announced, but the camera caught him stuffing at least $300 into his jacket first. "Can you cross-reference Victor's personal banking records?" William asked. We can't access personal accounts without... He authorized financial background checks when he was hired. It's in his contract. Pull them. James hesitated, then started typing. 5 minutes later, he had Victor's deposit history on screen. William scanned the dates, matching them to the footage timestamps. November 7th. Victor deposited $1,235 into his personal account the next morning, the exact amount that would have been in the tip pool before he announced $835. November 4th, a deposit of $990. Footage showed he'd reported $640 to the staff. October 29th, 1,100 deposited, 780 reported. Every single deposit matched a theft. Perfect one-to-one correlation. "How far back can we go?" William asked. "Banking records. We've got 18 months in his file." "Do it." By noon, they had the full picture. 18 months of systematic theft. 43 incidents in the past 8 weeks alone, totaling $12,800. Over the full 18 months, the number climbed to $31,200 stolen from tip pools. William sat back in his chair, feeling sick. $31,000 that should have gone to people like Malik, people who were counting every dollar, rationing insulin, driving cars that barely ran, working themselves into the ground for money that never made it to their pockets. "There's more," James said quietly. He'd pulled up HR files without being asked. 3 former employees filed complaints about tip discrepancies. All 3 complaints were investigated by Victor Kane himself. All 3 were dismissed as misunderstandings. All 3 employees quit within a month. Names: Emma Martinez, David Sullivan, and Christina Park. William wrote them down. "Can you contact them today? Tell them I need to speak with them directly. Don't tell them why, just that it's important and confidential." James nodded and started making calls. William turned back to the monitors, pulling up footage from different angles, building his case with the methodical focus of someone who knew exactly how much was at stake. By 2 p.m., James had reached all 3 former employees. They agreed to conference calls, voices skeptical and wary. William didn't blame them. They'd reported problems and been ignored. Why should they trust him now? But when he explained what he'd found, when he started reading back dates and amounts that matched their own experiences, the skepticism shifted to something else: relief, vindication, and anger. Emma Martinez, a single mother who'd worked at Harborside for 4 years, practically shook with rage over the phone. "I knew something was wrong. I tracked my tips every single night. But when I went to Victor, he made me feel crazy. Said I was remembering wrong. Said maybe customers were tipping less than I thought. He gaslit me for 3 months until I couldn't take it anymore and quit. How much do you estimate he took from you? William asked. At least $8,000, maybe more. David Sullivan had a similar story. So did Christina Park. Together, the three of them confirmed a pattern that stretched back before William even had the footage to prove it. Victor had been running this scheme for years, and he'd gotten away with it because he was the one who investigated complaints about himself. The system was designed to protect the thief. By 4 p.m., William had everything he needed: video evidence from 43 separate incidents, bank records showing deposits that matched the theft amounts down to the dollar, testimony from 3 former employees, POS data showing the actual tips versus what was reported, and, most damning of all, the clear footage of Victor pocketing cash while his employees watched, trusting him to be fair. William pulled out his phone and drafted an email to every employee at the flagship location. Mandatory meeting Monday morning, 10 a.m. Attendance required, no exceptions. He hit send, then leaned back in his chair and stared at the frozen image on his center monitor. Victor Kane, hand in his jacket pocket, smile on his face, stealing from people who couldn't afford to lose a single dollar. James was watching him carefully. What are you going to do? William thought about Malik writing in his envelope, about the burger that cost more than it should have, about his father's words on the wall. Your people are your business. Protect them like it. I'm going to make this right, William said. Every dollar, every person, everything. James nodded slowly. Good. They spent the rest of Saturday organizing the evidence into a presentation that couldn't be disputed, couldn't be argued away, couldn't be anything except exactly what it was: proof that Victor Kane had stolen from his employees for 18 months, while William Langford sat in his office and never noticed. That was going to change. Monday morning, everyone would see the truth. And then William would find out who he really was when nobody was watching. Monday morning, 9:58 a.m. The conference room at Harborside's flagship location had never felt this small. 15 employees crammed into a space meant for 12, their confusion thick enough to taste. Malik stood near the back wall, still in his server apron from setting up the lunch shift, his eyes darting between his coworkers and the closed door like he was calculating escape routes. Victor Kane sat front and center, legs crossed, the picture of administrative confidence. He'd gotten the meeting notice like everyone else. But unlike the servers who'd spent the weekend anxious and speculating, Victor seemed almost bored. Mandatory meetings meant policy updates, maybe new menu items, nothing that required actual concern. Maria Gonzalez leaned over to Emma Williams and whispered, "Did you hear anything about this?" Emma shook her head, her fingers drumming nervously against her thigh. Not a word, just the email. Jason Davis checked his phone for the 3rd time in as many minutes. This better be quick. I've got tables in 30 minutes. The door opened at exactly 10 a.m. William Langford walked in wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Malik made in a month, and the room went silent. Most of them had never seen the owner in person. He was a name on paychecks, a signature on corporate emails, a distant figure who existed somewhere in the clouds above their daily reality. Malik's breath stopped. The man from Friday night. The guy in the thrift store jacket who couldn't afford a burger. The stranger he'd given free food to. Oh, God. William's eyes found Malik immediately, held his gaze for just a second, and something passed between them that Malik couldn't name. Recognition, acknowledgement, maybe apology. Oh, my God, Malik breathed, so quiet that only Emma heard him. The man from Friday night. It was the owner. Victor's posture shifted. He uncrossed his legs, sat up straighter, his expression cycling rapidly from confusion to concern to carefully managed neutrality. "Mr. Langford, we weren't expecting you. Is there something we can help with?" William set his laptop on the table and connected it to the projection screen without answering. The screen flickered to life, showing nothing yet except a blue background. He turned to face the room, his expression unreadable. Friday night. I sat at the bar in this restaurant wearing an $8 jacket from Goodwill. I had $15 in my wallet. I ordered water and fries because that's all I could afford. The room was dead silent. Malik felt his face go hot, felt every pair of eyes shift toward him. William continued, his voice calm but carrying an edge like broken glass. Malik Jordan brought me a $24 burger and told me it was kitchen waste. He gave me sweet potato fries, a salad, and chocolate mousse. He did this because he believed that someone who'd worked hard all day deserved more than fries, regardless of what they could pay. Victor's face had gone pale. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair. And then Victor Kane punished him for it. Docked him $24 from his tips that night. Cut his hours from 11 shifts down to 9. Called him a bleeding heart, like compassion was something to be ashamed of. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. Jason leaned forward, his eyes locked on William. Maria had stopped breathing. William clicked his laptop. The projection screen filled with security footage. The timestamp read November 7th, 10:31 p.m. This is the tip counting from Friday night. Watch carefully. The footage played. Victor gathering the servers. The glass jar. Everyone dumping in their tips. And then Victor turning his back, his shoulders blocking the view, his hands moving in ways that were clear even without seeing the details. "You can see here," William said, his voice neutral like he was narrating a nature documentary instead of exposing theft. "Victor Kane is counting tips while positioned, so his staff cannot see his hands. Now watch what happens next." The footage continued. Victor's left hand dipped into the jar. His right hand moved toward his jacket pocket. The motion was quick, practiced, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. But the camera angle caught everything. Bills disappeared into Victor's pocket. He took approximately $300 from the pool before announcing the total as $835. William clicked to the next slide. A bank statement appeared on screen. The following morning, Victor deposited $1,235 into his personal checking account, the exact amount that would have been in the tip pool before he removed $300. Victor shot to his feet. "This is insane. I don't know what you think you saw, but sit down." William's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through Victor's protest like a blade. "I'm not finished." Victor sat, but his jaw was clenched so tight Malik could see the muscles jumping in his cheek. William clicked through more footage. Different nights, different dates. Each one showing the same pattern. Victor turning away. Victor taking money. Victor lying about the totals. This happened 43 times in the past 8 weeks alone. I have footage of every single incident. The total amount stolen in that time period is $12,800. Gasps rippled through the room. Emma had tears streaming down her face. Jason looked like he might be sick. Rebecca Moore sat frozen, her hands clasped so tight her knuckles had gone white. But it goes back further. William pulled up a spreadsheet, rows and rows of dates and dollar amounts. "I've analyzed 18 months of data. Victor Kane has systematically stolen $31,200 from tip pools. That's $31,000 that should have gone to you, to the people who earned it." Malik couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The numbers were bigger than he'd imagined, worse than he'd feared. $31,000. How many insulin prescriptions? How many car repairs? How many rent payments? How much of Lily's college fund had never existed because of this man? William turned to face Victor directly. "I spoke with 3 former employees over the weekend. Emma Martinez, David Sullivan, and Christina Park. All 3 filed complaints about tip discrepancies. All 3 complaints were investigated by you, dismissed as errors, and all 3 employees were gone within a month. Would you like to explain that?" Victor's face had gone from pale to red. "Those were legitimate investigations. I followed protocol. If they weren't satisfied with the results..." "You investigated yourself." William's voice was ice. "You received complaints about your own theft and declared them unfounded. That's not protocol. That's cover-up." "I want a lawyer." Victor stood again, this time moving toward the door. "I'm not discussing this without legal counsel." "Fine. You'll need one." William didn't move to stop him. "But before you go, I want everyone in this room to see something." He clicked to the final slide. It showed a breakdown of stolen amounts by victim. Malik's name sat at the top. Malik Jordan lost $11,200 over 18 months. The number hit Malik like a physical blow. $11,000. 11,000. He gripped the wall behind him to stay upright, his vision swimming. Jason Davis, 9,558. Rebecca Moore, 6,184. Emma Williams, 5,932. William read through every name, every amount, while Victor stood frozen by the door, and the employees sat in various states of shock and rage. When he finished, William turned back to Victor one final time. "You're fired, effective immediately. You have 10 minutes to collect your personal belongings before security escorts you out. You will not speak to any employee. You will not return to this property. And if you have any sense at all, you'll contact a lawyer because this is going to get worse before it gets better for you." Victor's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Then he turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing in the hallway until they faded completely. The conference room erupted. Emma was sobbing openly now. Jason had his head in his hands. Maria was cursing in Spanish, a steady stream of words that needed no translation. Rebecca just stared at the screen, at her name and that number, like she couldn't process what it meant. Malik stayed against the wall, his legs shaking too badly to risk moving. $11,200. He'd known it was bad. He'd documented it, tracked it, saved every scrap of evidence in that manila envelope. But seeing it quantified like this, seeing the total sum of what had been stolen from him, made it real in a way his nightly notes never had. William raised his hands, waiting for quiet. It took a full minute before the room settled enough for him to continue. "I know this is overwhelming. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But I need you to understand something." He paused, making eye contact with each person in the room. "This should never have happened. I built systems that allowed Victor Kane to steal from you for 18 months. I created an environment where your complaints were investigated by the person you were complaining about. I failed to protect you, and for that, I'm sorry." His voice cracked slightly on the last word, the first show of emotion since he'd walked in. "Sorry doesn't give us our money back," Jason said, anger making his voice sharp. "No, it doesn't." William nodded. "Which is why sorry isn't all you're getting. We're going to fix this. Every dollar, every person, everything." Malik finally found his voice, though it came out rough and unsteady. "How?" William looked at him, and in that look, Malik saw the man from Friday night, the guy who'd asked why anyone would show kindness to a stranger, the person who'd been searching for something he couldn't find in spreadsheets. "However long it takes," William said. "Starting right now." Monday, 10:47 a.m. The conference room had mostly emptied. Emma had gone outside to call her sister, still crying. Jason and Rebecca were in the hallway talking in low, intense voices. Maria had returned to the host stand because lunch service waited for no one, even corporate disasters. Malik remained. He sat now in one of the conference room chairs, his elbows on his knees, his head in his hands. William had asked him to stay, said they needed to talk, but for the moment neither of them spoke. William pulled up a chair and sat across from him, maintaining a respectful distance. He'd closed his laptop. The projection screen was dark. It was just two men in a too small room, trying to figure out what came next. "I've been keeping records," Malik finally said, his voice muffled by his hands. "Every night, every amount I thought I should have gotten versus what Victor gave me. I wrote it down." "I know." William's voice was gentle. "I saw you Friday night in the parking lot. You were writing in an envelope." Malik's head came up. "You saw that?" "I didn't leave when you thought I did. I needed to see the whole picture." William leaned forward slightly. "How long have you been documenting this?" 48 nights, almost 2 months. Malik pulled the envelope from his jacket pocket, worn soft from carrying Lily's college fund, barely legible now. "I didn't know what else to do. Nobody was going to believe a server over a manager, but I thought maybe if I had proof, if I could show the pattern." He trailed off, the futility of it settling over him again. What good were 48 pieces of paper against a system designed to ignore him? "Your documentation matches my data almost perfectly," William said. "The dates, the amounts. You were right about all of it." Malik laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Great. I was right about being robbed. What do I win?" "Your money back. With interest." Malik's eyes snapped up. "What?" William stood and walked to his laptop, pulling up a new spreadsheet. "I'm refunding every dollar Victor stole, every person he took from. And because you all should have had access to that money for months or years and didn't, I'm adding 18% interest. It's the least I can do for the time value you lost." He turned the laptop toward Malik. There was his name, and next to it, 13/216. Malik stared at the number. $13,216. His vision blurred. His hands started shaking. That was more money than he'd seen in one place in his entire life. That was Lily's insulin for a year. That was car repairs and overdue bills, and maybe enough left over to actually start a college fund that meant something. I can't. His voice broke. He tried again. I can't accept that. Yes, you can. It's yours. It was always yours. I'm just returning what was stolen. The shaking in Malik's hands spread to his arms, his shoulders, his whole body. He tried to hold it together, tried to maintain some dignity, but the weight of 18 months crashed down on him all at once. Every shift where he'd smiled through the theft, every night he'd driven home wondering how to make the numbers work, every time he'd looked at Lily and known he was failing her, he collapsed forward, his face in his hands, and sobbed, full body shaking, the kind of crying that comes from a place too deep for words. William said nothing, just sat there and let him break apart. It took several minutes before Malik could breathe normally again. When he finally looked up, his face was wet and his eyes were red, but something had loosened in his chest. Sorry, he muttered, wiping at his face with his sleeve. Don't be. William's expression was soft, sad. You've earned the right to fall apart. Malik laughed again, wet and shaky. Yeah, I guess I have. William stood and pulled a check from his jacket pocket, already made out. He set it on the table between them. $13,216, written in precise handwriting. Malik Jordan on the payee line. Malik picked it up with trembling fingers. The paper felt impossibly light for what it represented. There's more, William said quietly. The money is just the start. I'm making structural changes, real ones. He pulled up another document on his laptop, a bulleted list that he read aloud. Effective immediately, mandatory tip pooling is terminated. Servers keep their own tips. The POS system will track all tips automatically and generate weekly reports that get posted publicly for staff review. There's a new anonymous hotline that reports directly to me, bypassing all management. Zero tolerance policy for retaliation. Anyone who penalizes an employee for reporting concerns or treating customers with kindness gets fired, no exceptions. And a full external audit of all financial practices across all 5 locations, because if this was happening here, I need to know if it's happening anywhere else. Malik listened, watching William's face as he spoke. This wasn't corporate speak. This was someone who'd seen how badly the system had failed and was tearing it down to rebuild it right. Why? Malik asked. Not why are you fixing it? I get that. But why did you come in undercover? You could have just looked at the numbers, fired Victor, moved on. William was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to the window overlooking the dining room, watching Maria seat an early lunch table. My father opened this restaurant 30 years ago. He knew every employee by name. He worked the line, bussed tables, covered shifts when people called in sick. He believed that taking care of people wasn't just good morals. It was good business. William turned back to Malik. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I got caught up in expansion, efficiency, profit margins. I stopped seeing people and started seeing labor costs. And then you came in wearing a thrift store jacket, Malik said quietly. And you treated me like I mattered. William's voice was rough. You risked your job to feed someone you thought was struggling. You took a hit because you believed kindness was more important than money. That's who my father built this place for, people like you. And I'd let the system rot from the inside while I sat in my office, congratulating myself for 12% growth. Malik stood, still holding the check, still not quite believing this was real. What you said to Victor about how you treat people when nobody's watching, that's what you were testing, wasn't it? You wanted to see who we really were. I got my answer. William extended his hand. Thank you for being exactly who you are, even when it cost you. Malik shook his hand, his grip firm despite the tremor still running through him. Does this mean I'm not getting written up for the burger? William smiled, the first real smile Malik had seen from him. You're getting a promotion. We'll talk about that later. Right now, you should go call your daughter. Malik nodded. He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Mr. Langford, that thing you said about bleeding hearts, Victor was wrong. Having a bleeding heart just means you still give a damn. Don't ever let anyone make you ashamed of that. I won't, William said. Not anymore. Malik left the conference room and walked out into the November sun, clutching a check that would change his life and an envelope full of evidence that had finally meant something. Behind him, William stood alone. looking at his father's words on his phone screen. Your people are your business. Protect them like it. He'd lost sight of that truth. Now he had to make sure he never forgot it again. Malik sat in his car in the parking lot, the check still in his hands, his phone pressed to his ear. His ex-wife Jennifer's voice came through tinny and confused. Wait, say that again. $13,000 what? $13,216. Malik's voice cracked. The owner found out the manager was stealing our tips. For 18 months, Jen. He stole $11,000 from me, and Mr. Langford's paying it all back with interest. Silence on the other end. Then a sound that might have been crying or laughing or both. Oh my God, Malik, oh my God. I know. He stared at the check like it might disappear. I can pay for Lily's insulin the whole year and the car repair. And I can start actually saving. Come over tonight, please. Lily needs to see you. You need to tell her this. Malik promised he would, said goodbye, and sat there for another moment, just breathing. The November sun warmed the windshield. For the first time in 18 months, the tightness in his chest had loosened enough that he could actually fill his lungs. His phone buzzed. A text from Maria. Mr. Langford wants to see you again. Says it's important. Malik walked back inside, wondering what else could possibly happen today. He found William in the conference room, laptop open, looking more tired than he had that morning, but also more settled, like something fundamental had shifted in him. Sit down, William said, gesturing to the chair across from him. We need to talk about your future here. Malik's stomach dropped. Future. That word could mean anything. If this is about the burger on Friday, I already explained. This isn't about punishment, it's about recognition. William closed his laptop and leaned forward. I've been reviewing personnel files all afternoon. Your performance reviews are exceptional. You've been here 6 years. You train new servers. You handle complaints better than most managers I've seen. You de-escalate conflicts. You make customers feel valued even on your worst days. Malik shifted uncomfortably. I'm just doing my job. No, you're not. What you do goes beyond job requirements. William pulled out a folder. I'm offering you the position of Assistant General Manager, 35% salary increase. You'll oversee training, handle scheduling, and work directly with me on implementing the new oversight systems. The words hit Malik like a physical thing. Assistant General Manager, a real salary, not just tips and hope. The kind of position that came with stability, benefits, a title that meant something. I don't know what to say. Malik's voice was barely above a whisper. Say yes. You've proven you understand what this place should be. You treat people with dignity even when the system punishes you for it. That's not service, Malik. That's leadership. Malik thought about Lily, about the insulin prescriptions that kept coming every month with price tags that made his hands shake, about the college fund that had become a collection of evidence instead of hope, about every night he'd driven home, wondering how much longer he could keep this up. What about benefits? The question came out before he could stop it, sounding desperate and small. William didn't flinch. Full health insurance, dental, vision, and here's the part I need you to really hear. He pulled up another document on his laptop, turning it so Malik could see. Dependent coverage, zero copay for chronic disease management. Malik's breath stopped. Chronic disease management. That meant Lily's diabetes. That meant insulin wouldn't cost $340 a month anymore. That meant doctor visits, monitoring supplies, emergency care, all of it covered. You're serious? It wasn't a question. Malik could see the line item right there in the benefits package, could see the words that would change everything. Completely serious. Your daughter deserves the care she needs. You deserve not to have to choose between her health and paying rent. Something broke open in Malik's chest, not the same way it had that morning when he'd seen the check. This was deeper, more fundamental. This was the terror he'd been carrying for years, the fear that one bad month, one unexpected expense, one coverage denial would mean Lily suffered, finally being lifted off his shoulders. He collapsed into the chair, his whole body shaking with sobs he couldn't control, full, wrenching cries that came from a place beyond words. William said nothing, just pushed a box of tissues across the table and waited. When Malik could finally speak, his voice was raw. I've been rationing her insulin. Not much. Just enough to make it stretch between paychecks. I know it's dangerous. I know it could kill her. But I didn't have a choice. You have a choice now. William's voice was gentle. Take the position. Take the insurance. Take care of your daughter the way she deserves. Malik wiped his face, his hand still trembling. "Why are you doing this? Really, you could have just paid us back and moved on." William was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "Because Friday night, you showed me what this business is supposed to be about. You risked everything for a stranger because you believed people mattered more than profit. That's the principle my father built Harborside on, and I'd forgotten it. You reminded me." "So this is gratitude?" Malik asked. "This is justice. You've been leading without the title or the pay for years. I'm just making it official." Malik looked down at his hands, at the calluses from carrying trays and the burned scars from hot plates, and the evidence of 6 years spent serving people who rarely saw him as fully human. Then he looked up at William and saw something he hadn't expected: genuine respect. "I'll take it," Malik said. "The position. All of it. Thank you." William stood and extended his hand. "Thank you for not giving up, for keeping your humanity when the system tried to grind it out of you, for being exactly who we needed, even when no one was watching." They shook hands, and Malik felt the weight of 18 months finally release its grip. The check in his pocket, the promotion, the insurance that meant Lily would be safe. It was too much to process, too big to feel real, but it was real. The evidence was right there in William's eyes, in the contract he was already pulling up, in the future that had suddenly opened up, where before there'd been only exhaustion and fear. Malik walked out of that conference room a different person than he'd walked in, not because of the money or the title, though those mattered, but because someone had finally seen him, really seen him, and decided he was worth protecting. 3 months passed before Malik fully believed his life had actually changed. The first paycheck with his new salary hit his account, and he stared at the number for a full hour, waiting for it to disappear. It didn't. The second month, Lily's insulin prescription came through with a $0 copay, and he cried in the pharmacy parking lot. The third month, he started sleeping through the night for the first time in years. Now he stood in the Harborside dining room during the pre-shift meeting, wearing a button-down shirt that actually fit and looking at 3 new servers who were nervous in that way all new servers were, wondering if they'd made a mistake taking this job. "All right, listen up," Malik said, his voice carrying the authority that came from having earned every word. "I know you're scared. First restaurant job is always scary. But I'm going to tell you the most important thing you need to know about working here, and I need you to really hear it." The 3 servers, 2 college students, and a single dad named Marcus, who reminded Malik painfully of himself, leaned in. "Every person who walks through that door matters. I don't care if they're wearing a suit or work boots. I don't care if they ordered the most expensive thing on the menu or just coffee and fries. You treat them with dignity. You treat them like they're human, because they are, and that's what we do here." One of the college students, a girl named Sophie, raised her hand tentatively. "What if they're rude or demanding?" "Then you stay professional and kind anyway, not because they deserve it necessarily, but because you do. Because how you treat people when nobody's watching is who you really are." Malik paused, thinking about his father who'd taught him that, about William who'd proven it mattered. "My dad used to say that the measure of a person is how they treat people who can't do anything for them. That's the standard here. That's what Harborside means." Marcus nodded slowly. "And management has our backs?" "Absolutely. You see something wrong, you report it. There's an anonymous hotline now, and if someone retaliates against you for doing the right thing, they're gone. That's a promise." The new servers looked at each other, something like relief crossing their faces. Sophie smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. "Now get out there and show people what good service looks like," Malik said. "Questions, you come find me. I'll be on the floor with you." They scattered to their stations. Malik watched them go, remembering his own first shift 6 years ago, how terrified he'd been, how certain he was that he'd mess everything up. Nobody had told him then that kindness was the point. He'd figured it out himself, and it had nearly cost him everything. These kids wouldn't have to learn that the hard way. Movement in the corner caught his eye. A man in work clothes, paint-stained jeans and boots that had seen better days was being seated at the bar by the new host. The guy looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that came from physical labor and not enough sleep. Malik grabbed a menu and walked over, settling into the familiar rhythm of approaching a table. But this time, there was no fear underneath it. No anxiety about whether he'd make enough tips. No dread about what Victor might do later. Just the work itself, the way it was supposed to be. "Evening," Malik said, setting down the menu. "I'm Malik. What can I get you?" The man looked up, and Malik saw the quick calculation in his eyes. The assessment of the menu prices against what was probably in his wallet. The resignation that came with knowing you couldn't afford what you wanted. "Just water and fries, I think," the man said quietly. Malik nodded, writing it down. Then he leaned in slightly, his voice low and conspiratorial. "Between you and me, the kitchen made extra chicken tonight. It's just going to waste if someone doesn't eat it. You interested?" The man's eyes widened. "I can't afford. Didn't ask if you could afford it. Asked if you were interested." A smile broke across the man's face, small but genuine. Yeah, I'd appreciate that." "You got it. Be right back." Malik walked toward the kitchen, passing the table where Lily sat doing her homework, her insulin pump visible on her hip, but no longer something that made his chest tight with fear. She looked up and waved. He waved back, his heart full in a way it hadn't been in years. In the corner office that overlooked the dining room, William Langford sat with a documentary filmmaker talking about wage theft in the restaurant industry. The filmmaker had reached out after hearing about what happened at Harborside, wanted to tell the story as a warning to other workers. $15 billion a year, William was saying, looking directly into the camera. That's how much is stolen from American workers through wage theft. Tips, overtime, breaks. It adds up. And the people it hurts most are the ones who can least afford it. The filmmaker leaned forward. "What would you say to employees who suspect they're being stolen from?" "Document everything, every shift, every tip, every discrepancy. Write it down with dates and amounts. Because proof matters. Your truth matters." William's voice was firm. "And find someone you can trust to report it to. An owner who cares. A labor board. A lawyer. Don't suffer in silence." And to business owners. William thought about Malik in the parking lot with his envelope, about Victor's systematic theft, about his own failure to see what was happening right under his nose. Your people are your business, not your labor costs, not your efficiency metrics. The actual humans who show up every day and do the work that makes your company run. Protect them fiercely. Build systems that make theft impossible and whistleblowing safe. And if you can't be bothered to do that, then you don't deserve to call yourself a leader." The filmmaker nodded, satisfied. They wrapped the interview and started packing equipment. William stood and walked to the window overlooking the dining room, watching Malik train the new servers, watching customers eat and laugh and trust that they were being treated fairly. This was what his father had built. Not profit margins or expansion plans, but a place where people mattered, where kindness wasn't punished, where doing the right thing was possible. William had lost sight of that. But he'd found it again in a thrift store jacket and a burger he couldn't afford, in a man who'd chosen compassion over self-preservation, in the realization that the numbers on spreadsheets represented actual human lives. He wouldn't forget again. Down on the floor, Malik delivered the extra chicken to the man at the bar, along with sides he hadn't ordered and a chocolate mousse for good measure. "Chocolate helps," Malik said with a smile. "Trust me." The man's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means." "I do, actually," Malik said softly. "I really do." He walked away to check on his next table, leaving the man to eat in peace. Behind him, the restaurant hummed with life and purpose, and the simple revolutionary act of treating people like they mattered. It was exactly what it was supposed to be. Finally. And just like that, the story of Harborside found its new beginning. From a stolen tip jar in the back room to a quiet act of kindness at a crowded bar. From a man who thought no one saw his struggle to an owner who finally remembered what leadership meant. This wasn't just a story about money. It was a story about dignity, about courage, about choosing to do the right thing when nobody is watching, and discovering that someone always is. If Malik's journey moved you, if William's transformation gave you hope, or if you've ever worked a job where kindness felt like a risk, tell us your thoughts below. Your voice matters here. And if stories like this remind you that goodness still exists, that ordinary people can create extraordinary change, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. It helps us bring more real human stories to a world that moves too fast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for feeling. And until our next story, take care of each other. Always.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.